Okay, so intake form templates. We'll just go down to one of these. Let's see, buyer intake form should be fine. Come over here to triggers. And each trigger is a standalone action that's happening. Now you can click this and it's going to open them up so you can see the conditions. Now, I'm not sure if you were asking if you could have multiple conditions, but if that's what you were asking, you can definitely have multiple conditions in here. You can have as many as you want. The cool thing about these conditions too is you can have and or statements. So if you want to say, the tax ID has to be not blank. And sorry, we're on Zoom, so it's going to take a minute for it to process. But and then you have the ability, once you get that one in, to say, so come over here to, let me just scroll down to one that already has a condition on it. And some of these are grayed out because they're not turned on. So if you see them grayed out, it means they're not going to fire. You have to turn those on. But let me come down here and see if I can find one that's turned on and has a, okay, here you go. So this one, I could add another condition and then both of them would have to be true for this to fire. Or you can click on this blue field, or it might say something else besides field. But if you click on that, now you're creating a child condition, and this would be an or statement. So if I created another statement there, it would be this has to be true or this has to be true, not and, which you would create that way. So let me go ahead and click back on here. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, just get a little bit more specific and put a new question in there on multiple form triggers. But yeah, you can have as many form triggers as you want in there. Listed down, then you can have as many conditions within each trigger as well. So each condition is going to say whether that particular thing is going to fire, whether that's a template, whether it's a field section, all the different things that we can fire. Okay. I know how to connect and how to import a document, but how do I import it as an additional file? Oh, not the main file. Candace, that's brand new, those additional files. I don't think we have that set up yet. Jana, could you just mark that question down for Shane? He's not on today, but see if we can get additional file ability for the for DotLoop. In the meantime, the workaround is bring it into its own placeholder and then just move it up to an additional file. But let me see here. But yeah, actually, I don't know if DotLoop gives us that ability. Their API is a little bit weak and some of the things that we want to do with DotLoop, but I'll have to test that and then get back to you and I can send you a message. Okay, question about intake forms. How do I tell the form to remove a field instead of add? Sure. So let me come down here to one where there's a field in it. Okay, here's a field. So in the trigger section, you would come in here and you could just come over here and instead of add, you're going to say remove. Now, I would say this. Let me go over to the section where the fields are in this intake form so I can show you kind of a best practice here. When you're setting these up and when you're having these fields appear in here, and so in this instance, this is the things that are going to appear to the TC. And these are the things that are required for the TC to fill out before it becomes a transaction. I would say nothing should be green unless it comes in 100% of the time. So these fields are always going to be visible 100% of the time. If you have something like financing, where you have fields that aren't always going to show up in case it's like a cash deal or something like that, you would want to do that through the triggers and say, if financing is yes, then add my financing field section. Adding is much better way that we've seen over the past 2 years of doing it. It's a lot easier to figure out your mistakes if you start mixing things. Now, I will say there are times when you do want to do that. There are times when you may want to remove something, but 99% of the time you should default to an add instead of a subtract if at all possible, and try to keep it consistent through your whole process. If you do decide to go the remove route, then do it on everything. So it's easier for you to figure out your mistakes if something isn't quite triggering correctly. Okay. All conditions have to be true in order to fire. Yes. So, and that does count with Nicole, fields that aren't in your transaction. So let's say that you didn't add your financing fields and you really should have. Well, if you have a condition about one of those financing fields, you're going to see it grayed out. Some of them you'll see red, which means it's not true yet. The ones that are, I think, black or blue, those ones are correct. But you can also see one that's like a gray color. That means that the field that your condition is set off of does not exist in your transaction. So in that case, you would have to go over to your menu, say add a field, add that field in, and then set it to whatever you wanted. So, but yes, all conditions have to be true in order to fire. And that's where those or statements come in, because sometimes you don't want to have to say both these are true. Just if either one of these are true or one of these 5 things are true, then you can just go and set those or conditions and that'll solve your issue. Okay. Can you repeat the order for the triggers on the intake form? Fields first, then field sections. Yeah, so fields first, fields and field sections can be interchangeable. And I'll get to a little caveat there in a second. You want to have your templates last. I always prefer to put my date templates at the very end, but definitely have your fields first. And the reason why we want to do fields first is because if you're triggering something off of those fields in the future, you want those fields to come in first. And also, like for a date template, actually, this is a better example. If you have a date template that's calculating fields, like 5 days after this field, it's going to calculate another date for that. Well, if you add the date template first, and then you add your fields, it won't calculate. But if you add your fields first, and then your date template, then it will go through and actually calculate so the TC can see that before it actually becomes a transaction. So fields first, fields and field sections first, then templates. I always do date template last. I guess it technically doesn't matter as long as your fields are in there, but I always just do it to keep it organized in my brain. All right. Or can I do the following with the form trigger conditions? If financing status is cash, bring in my cash template. If financing status is VA, bring in my finance template. Yeah, definitely. So that's the way you should be doing it. You should have all of that stuff parsed out so that all your cash stuff is triggering off of, it being cash. Conventional is firing off whether, loan type, they choose conventional. Only your conventional task should come in. Only your conventional trigger should come in. Only your conventional field should come in. So fields, task templates, date templates, document templates, all those things can be triggered off of just saying cash, VA, financing, or conventional, USDA, whatever it is, for sure. Okay. Can you please show the or option again? Sure. It might take a minute because we're on Zoom, but we'll try to muddle through it here. Okay, so if I click on this blue field, and it could be anything. I mean, anything that is in here, there's field conditions. Let me see if there's any other conditions that I've set in here. Property, that one's a field too. Let's see if I have any other ones besides fields in here. No, that one's a field. That one's a field. That one's a field. Here's a contact role. Oh, here's a good example. So if I click on where it says contact role in blue, it's going to give me the option to create this little child condition is what we're calling it. If I click here on file, it will create an or condition down here and it will come up with this little or button on it. So let me try to create another or. Come down here and say property field, and we'll just make it tax ID again. Not blank, add. Okay, so it added that time. So there you go. So now I have 2 or conditions. So it could be if the lender exists, if the tax ID is not blank, or if the attorney is missing. It satisfies this first part of it, but it still has this one. So this one is still an and. Everything that's over here on the left side, see these 2 little arrows kind of pointing towards it? Those are ands. So one of these 3 things has to happen and this thing has to happen. Now you could have it, one of these 3 things has to happen, and then you could go and put a bunch of ors in this one, and it could be one of these things and then one of, whoops, sorry, I just moved it around. One of the file role conditions would be true, and then one of the contact role conditions could be true. So that's how that works.
one other point that I want to make of with this too is if you've noticed, Andrew doesn't have any details for each one of these triggers. We always suggest putting in something, even if it's a little blurb of, oh, we're bringing in additional field sections in regards to loans. And the reason that that's really helpful is if Andrew scrolls up to the top after entering something, it's going to turn purple first. That means you're entering something. You're going to always want to press enter on your keyboard, whether you're on Mac or PC, to save. Perfect. And then he's going to scroll to the very top. And when he clicks on sort triggers, that's where he's going to see those details. So right now, if he clicks on it, I'm sure he's going to see that there's a lot of them that say field section, but we don't know what that field section does. But if you look, we see that details, add financing field if something is true. So that's how you're sort of able to put your reorganize your triggers as well in here. That was one thing I wanted to note on this part, because I noticed you were missing that.
Yep. And this is just obviously like a demo thing. So I come in here and create them and test things. And so for you guys out there that are doing this, if you put those descriptions in here, it becomes a lot easier in the future, because now, like I said before, if someone asks a question, what order should they go in? Now you can kind of scan down this and say, wait a second, why are these templates coming in before these field sections? I should be moving these field sections up to the top. I should be moving these fields up to the top. So it's real easy because you have all this, and you would have descriptions of them so you can see what order you want to put them in. So you could just, it makes it very, very easy. I didn't have this when I first started. And well, that's the reason it's here now, because it was very difficult to, and we used to make you drag and drop. Used to be a little button here where you'd have to drag and drop them down pages. Oh, it's a nightmare. So anyway, that's what triggers is much, much better. Okay.
I think the only other question that I've had a lot, and I can see some of you guys have done training with me, so I'm glad that you guys are here. The main question that I keep getting from everyone really is when to know how to put on a form condition or a form trigger when you're starting to build out your intake form. So where I always like to start, and you guys, you're going to be like, Hannah, you've told us so many times, check out your fields first and go to your intake questions. So you're going to start there. What do we want to ask on this particular intake form? And from there, that's when you're going to be making those additional decisions. So I have a lot of you guys saying, if we need the homeowners association, for example, usually it's just that you want to know that it's there. And you want to be able to use whether they say yes to the homeowners association to trigger and bring in some more task templates or email templates. That's typically what I hear from you guys. Now, if we're talking about the buyer's contingency, maybe there's an additional date that we need to bring on for that. That's when we're going to decide, okay, we need a form condition. We're going to head over to the form conditions. We're going to say that if this is equal to yes, we need to bring on these buyer contingency dates, whatever that looks like for you guys. Whenever you bring something on in your form conditions, you'll also want to make sure that it comes on to your form triggers, because we're bringing it onto that field, but we need to make sure we're making that connection and we're bringing it over into our form triggers as well. So first, you're going to ask yourself the question in your intake form question. So you're going to go to fields, look at your intake form questions, look over those questions. And what I like to do is write out a little map for myself. If I know I need to bring on additional fields, I'll head to the form conditions, add in those fields, and then I head to my form triggers to make sure I'm bringing in that field section. Because if I don't bring in that field section, those fields aren't going to come on. It's not going to fire off the way I want it to. If I'm looking at homeowners association and I just want to bring on the homeowners association information, their website, the company, that kind of information after the fact, it's not something the agent would know on that intake form, then I'm going to go from selecting that question, and then I'm immediately going to go to form triggers. I'm going to build out that logic to use that condition. If homeowners association is equal to yes, bring on this additional task template, email template, contact roles, whatever it needs to be that you need to bring on.
Now, let me actually walk through that real quick. So form conditions, think of as a form builder that's building your form while the agent's in it. So the form conditions are actually building the form as you're in it. So it's saying if I say yes to, or if I put buyer in there for the contact type, then the agent is going to all of a sudden see all of these appear. All of these fields will appear, and that's why it's the form builder. It's building the form as they're going. And you're saying, I need all these forms for him to see or her to see. And which ones do I want to make this one required and this one required if it's a buyer. Then as you come down, And you can see that I want to add another contact role for buyer and make it required because he's representing the buyer. So let's make the buyer required as the contact that he needs to put in. And then maybe there's a buyer broker agreement. You don't have to make that required, but let's just say you want him to see it just in case he has it. And so you can add a document there. And now if it's a buyer, are there any instructions you want your TC to see? If it's chosen buyer, then these would appear after the fact when the TC is going through the file. It will remind the TC of whatever notes you put in here. So you can, and they do have to check these off before it becomes a transaction. So it is, they will be able to see these. They have to actually check them, physically check them off before it becomes a transaction. So the big difference is these are appearing in the form as you're going through it. But now if you said, hey, every time it's a buyer, I also want to add in whatever field section. Now you would come over to the triggers and say, here's a field section. I want to put listing dates and special conditions in. That doesn't really make sense, but let's just go with it. So those are the two field sections. This is very important. When you're adding field sections to the transaction, unless you have a really good handle that the TC is going to have every single answer in that whole field section, do not mark this yes. What this means is that it's required to put in before it can become a transaction. So if you mark yes here and there's 20 fields in this field section, that TC has to have all 20 of those answered before it can become a transaction. So 99.9% of the time you're going to have no here. And then this is typically add is the way we teach it, but you can do a remove. So that's adding that field section if these conditions are true. So let's pop open these conditions. If contact client type is not blank, then go ahead and pop in these two. And that's why they have the plus, because they're adds. So you don't have to go in here every time to see what you've done. It's add listing dates field section, add special conditions field section. If this is true, it's going to add those things that you put in there. So just think of it like that, is this is building the form as the agent's going through. This is after the fact. It's going to add in field sections, fields, templates, things like that after they've hit the submit button.
Something else that I've seen is that when we're building these out and we're saying we want to bring in these specific field sections. So for example, the listing dates, I think that's, or special conditions might be a good one. Could you go to the fields and show the special conditions, that field section specifically?
Sure.
I'm not even sure where it is actually though.
Okay,
We'll have to look for it.
Let's do this. What was it? Special conditions?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Andrew's using that Control F feature. I told you guys that about that when you're on this and you're looking for something, Control F, enter that in and see if we can locate it. There is the listing dates. So actually, you know, let's do the listing details because the listing dates were right there.
Okay.
So for example, if you guys see right now, what we have it doing is we have it bringing in the listing dates regardless of the logic. You can see that on the right-hand side, all of them are selected green. That means they're going to come in even if you say that it's not equal to listing, even if you do not need those listing dates. If you have it selected in this field section here, it's going to bring it in regardless.
Yeah,
so what my suggestion would be was to actually select none and remove it because we want it to be based off the logic. It's going to be the same thing for those HOA fields. If you say yes to HOA and we've built out the trigger for it, the trigger is going to bring on that field section. We don't need it selected underneath that field section on the intake form. We just need it in the trigger section. Do you think, is there a better way to explain that? Or do you want to walk through that in a different way, Andrew?
No, I think the best way to think about it for you guys is just don't mark anything over here on this right side unless it comes into 100% of your transactions. So if it's not coming into 100%, leave it off and then use a trigger to bring it in when it's necessary. So if this is a listing, then bring in my listing dates. If this is financing, bring in my financing dates, but do not check them over here or else they're going to be in every single transaction. Then you're going to have 200 fields in every transaction that you don't need to deal with. And it just, you're overcomplicating the process.
Exactly. All
right, cool. Let's see if there's any other Q&A. It looks like it's pretty blank. So I'm going to jump over to a couple of things that we have in the works just to kind of give you a preview. Do not contact me about what date this is coming out. About how much.
Don't reach out to Andrew.
I don't want 50,000 Facebook messages every day on this. So just be patient. It's coming soon. We'll get it out and we'll make a big announcement on Facebook and we'll make a big announcement through the through the support channels. And
maybe we'll have a webinar. Who knows?
exactly. So, but I do want to give you a little preview so that you can start thinking around how you would use this. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you, it is on our new scale plan that's coming out. So the scale plan has to come out first before we can even release this. It will be a higher price. So right now everyone's on the automation beta. That's going to turn into the scale plan shortly. This feature will be on that highest upgrade of plans. So it's messaging. In messaging, you can have messages and you can send them to anyone in the transaction. So think of it like a Slack for OTC. You can send them from a particular transaction. So if I'm in 1234 Beverly, that's where this is it's gonna reference that. And then you can say, yes, I think it is, or whatever. And then the other person can come in here. Now this is going to be sent out through the app. It's also going to be sent to their email. So if you don't want to add people to the app, or they don't want to add the app, they're still going to be able to get these messages through their email. It's going to come up in their email. It's going to say, click reply here, and then they're going to be able to reply back to you. Now there is some advanced functionality that we're working on with these that I'm not going to go over today, but some ability to send a reference to a field, to contact, a document, things like that to them so that they can actually see what you're talking about. There's going to be threads in here where you can see all of the responses back and forth. You can add a reply. You can take off a collaborator. Let's just say that I don't want this person on here anymore. I can go ahead and remove them. There are logs where you can see exactly when people opened them. So Adam opened this on Tuesday at 11:19. Now I have tracking that they actually looked at it, but why didn't they fill it out? I can re-ping them. I can hit this ping button. It's going to resend this message to them. A lot of different things you can do on this. We're still working on a lot of the functionality of it. You can see if it's red or not, pin it to the top, delete it. Now you won't be able to delete it unless you're the admin on the account. We don't want people just deleting things willy-nilly and, kind of ruining the chain of auditing, especially if you're in a state that requires that auditing throughout the transaction. We're not going to let people that don't have the authority to delete these. So anyway, that's a real 100,000 foot overview. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what's coming in the future. Think of it as a Slack. You're going to be able to send to anyone in the transaction, really. So if you have inspectors in there and whatever, and the cool part about it, I think the best part about it is we're hitting them where they usually do things. So that's email. And so this will just send a copy of this to their email. When they reply back to it, it will come right back in the transaction so that you don't have to go and triage email all day. The biggest thing that we've seen with adoption is that people don't want to open up your program or download your app. Well, now they don't have to. You can send these messages directly from email, but you don't have to go to your email to send them. You can do everything right from OTC and get the replies back in OTC so that you're not triaging, 5,000 emails a day. If you looked at my email right now, just from today, I probably have, 200 plus messages that I have to dig through. Half of them are probably junk. The other half are probably things that I don't necessarily need to attend to. So this just gives you some direct access to things that are important in your transaction. So that's one of the things. The other thing that we went over before, but I'll show you again because it's coming out really soon. Again, don't contact me on a specific date. We don't have one, but we have the ability now to sync to, sorry about that. Let me click off of here and get that off. Okay. So we have the ability now. Sorry, there's so many unapproved documents in this transaction. Let me come down to here. So now you can come in here and say, hey, I need to get these signed. If you're using DocuSign, you can click on options. You can click DocuSign. You're already going to have your account set up. You can have 50 you can have 50 of these in here if you want to. So you could have like every agent's DocuSign account if you wanted to synced in here. So you choose which one you want. The envelope name is always going to be the address unless you change it. You do have the ability to come in here and say like, disclosure, whatever. You can type something in the beginning if you wanted to. Here are the documents that I chose there. Bring this, whoops, grab the wrong one. Bring this down. And then I can select who I want to get it. So I want all of my buyers to get this one. So I come down, find all my buyers. Okay. And then I would go ahead down to the bottom here. And we have some cool features. So one of them is bring this back into the transaction once it's signed. very important. And then send automatic reminders. You can say, hey, if they don't sign it, follow up with them 2 days after I send it, and then every day after. And so that will remind them of this DocuSign. Right now, I'm going to turn that off. So this one is really important because if it's under anyone that uses DocuSign knows that if it's under a certain 25 megabytes, I think it is, they will actually come back to your email, the documents. What this will do is reroute them. It will go to your email, but it will also route them into open to close for you as an unapproved document. And that's why you saw so many of those unapproved documents in mine, because we were testing. It will bring it as an unapproved document. You can review it, make sure all the signatures and initials are good, and then bring it down to your file roles where they should go and a set of file role on it. If it's over that 25 megabytes, what's going to happen is, I'll close this out. There is a little DocuSign tab at the top. You can come in here and you can go into any of the envelopes, and there'll be a button on it that says download into OTC. You click on that, and that will bring over all those larger documents into open to close, and you'll be able to choose where they go. So nice little, and oh, I did forget to mention, when you're over in the documents and you have the tab open here, once you get down to the bottom, it'll say build envelope. What that build envelope is going to do is open up a new tab of DocuSign. And then you can use DocuSign just as normal, just knowing that it will come back into open to close automatically. So hopefully that's a huge help. I think like almost 85% of our users are using DocuSign in some form. So that's why we chose DocuSign at the beginning. Some of the agent signing programs were having trouble with their APIs and things like Transaction Desk, ZipForm. We just don't have the access to do this yet, but we're constantly on our radar to try to get some of those other programs and signings in here. We have that for DotLoop as well. No, unfortunately, DotLoop doesn't have that ability right now through the API for us to link that up and get everything automated like we're doing with DocuSign. We've been talking to DotLoop off and on for the past 5 years about improvements that we would love to see in their API. So far, we haven't seen any of them done. So we'll see what happens in the future. We'd love to have every signing program in the world tacked in here so that you guys can have an easier experience. But my suggestion would be, for the convenience of this, I would get a cheap, Realtor account and maybe do your front end stuff that the agent's doing through that DotLoop, bring it into the transaction, and then you guys use DocuSign for any of the intermediary documents. That's how we use it. If you don't want to go to the cost, I understand. If your agents don't like that, I totally get it, but that's the best solution we have right now. Briefly review the SkySlope integration. Yeah, probably my weakest point, Jennifer. So I'll kind of muddle through this, but the APIs really aren't where I put my concentration. So, but I can show you. So one of two ways to do it. So if you're starting a transaction, come in to add property, go to import SkySlope, and then it's going to open up this new screen. You're going to be able to choose which profile. So you may have 50 agent profiles in here. You're going to choose, whoever, Sally agent. And then it's going to give you all of, do I want to search listings, whatever. Come in here, search for it, grab the listing, and then push it over to open to close. So that's the one way you can do it. I don't recommend that just because our intake forms are so dynamic and so automated. I would rather use our intake forms to bring in the information. And then send it to SkySlope on the back end, which how you can do that is you come in here, kind of like DotLoop, which I showed earlier. You just go to SkySlope and you have those same two options. You can either link to an existing property over there, or you can export all of this information to start a property over in SkySlope. So choose your profile, choose your property type, hit next, go through the steps of which documents and contacts and fields you want to send over there, and then push it over. Or you can link it so that later you can come into the documents and say add to SkySlope, or contacts and say add to SkySlope. Now, one of the things that I do want to point out is one of the things you're going to want to do is set up an API field mapping, because our fields in open to close may not have the same exact names as the ones over in DotLoop, SkySlope, Brokerment, Follow Boss, wherever you're pushing to.
So that was left-hand navigation, hammer icon, templates. Yep. And then in templates, API field mapping. It froze when you all of a sudden went from the dashboard to here. So I just want to make sure everyone knows the location for this.
Yep. Come right here to the hammer, templates, Oops, sorry. Trying to leave it on there so everyone can see it. And then down here, API field mapping, just add a new one and go to the API. In this case, it would be SkySlope. It's going to ask what your API SkySlope is. You choose, whichever one you want, choose the property type, choose the template name, and go ahead and create it. And so what it does here is when you create it, let me go into one that's existing so I don't jam this up, but let's go into this one. Oh crap. Let's try to find one.
I think the one below that might actually have.
Actually, you know what? I have this on.
You're on Idaho.
Let me go to all. Oops. Let me go to all and see if I think I have a follow-up boss one in here from my account. Okay. So over here are the fields coming in from follow-up boss. Okay. So it's going to go grab all those fields from follow-up boss, and then you're going to link your fields from open to close and tell it where to go. So where do I want to send it over to year built? Hopefully I would have like a year built in open to close. So that's, yeah, those two are the same. So that's good. They're the name the same, but you get down here to like closing date. I may have close of escrow or closing or close date, or, we've seen 1,000 names for that one thing. So you have to tell the two systems how to match them up. Now you're only doing this one time, just so you know. You save this template, and then when you go over to your transaction and it's asking you to push, to whatever that is. Let me think, where was I? I was over to here and SkySlope. So when you're asking to push on the next screen, it's going to add for an API field mapping template, and you put that template in, and then it knows exactly where to push those fields back and forth. So hopefully that answered your question.
I want to say we have a really solid article as well in our help center for it. I'm going to see if I can find it.
Yeah, our content team is really going through all of our videos and all of the different things in our program and writing, kind of step by step, and also just kind of overview documentation on that. So if you prefer not to watch a video and you prefer to see a step by step, definitely keep checking out our knowledge base, because it keeps getting better every day. Really cool stuff in there. Yeah, and just for anyone else on the call, it's using Brokerment, DotLoop, or SkySlope. All those work pretty similar. All the APIs are a little bit different in what they allow us to do and what they don't, but for the most part, they're 80% the same. The only caveat is Brokerment. They do require you to have a enterprise level account to be able to sync back and forth with the API. So just be aware of that. If you're using Brokerment and you don't see this option, it's because you probably don't have an enterprise account. Okay. No more questions. 25 minutes left. Let's see.
I have been asked a lot, when you submit the intake form, what do I do next? Well, you got to approve it. Do we have any intake forms that we can look at? We can talk about that approval. Oh
yeah, lots of them. I don't know what's in here, so we can kind of describe what it would look like if it was fully filled, but
absolutely.
Let me go in this first one. Yeah, let me go in a different one.
So something I do want to say with all of your guys' intake forms is that it might be asking for those set default fields. See how it's asking Andrew right now? We need a texting number. We need an email. These, once they're set up, this screen doesn't have to show up anymore. It's the same thing when it's asking you, how do we want to do the calculation? Are we doing based off of calendar days, business days? That's going to be a setting on your guys' intake form. So actually, Andrew, can you go to the intake form and show them the settings for it? And this is going to be the same for all of you guys. Left-hand navigation, hammer icon, templates. Head to your intake form. You're going to select edit. You're going to head over to settings. It's down underneath settings, underneath settings. And this is where you're deciding that calculation. So if you have this filled out, you won't have to fill out that every single time you approve the intake form. Some of you guys might want to set it based off of each transaction. Some of you guys might be okay with it saying calendar days by default. But the date calculation, the skipping federal holidays, that stuff is going to pop up. Now, when it comes to the email address and the phone number, we need an email address and a phone number associated with whoever you're logged in as. So Andrew, you want to show them where to go to set up the phone number?
Yeah, let's touch on this first.
Okay, yeah.
Weekend rule, federal rule. Now, if you have tasks that have those in them as well, this is a general first layer. The tasks, if you set those in the task, will overwrite this. So if you have a particular task that says, I don't know, call the lender on, and it lands on a Saturday, if you rolled it back to Friday, it's going to supersede the setting where you have NA. So it will actually roll it back to Friday. So anything on the lower level of our program will overwrite these general settings.
Perfect.
And then the reason, so the other thing that people, I don't want to say complain about, but I guess think it's an extra step is, is that they have to set their email signature every time. So that comes up a lot as well. That's not going to change anytime soon. It's just a part of the process to make sure that we have the correct. It doesn't like keep an old one in there, and you want one for a particular agent. Let's say Susie agent has her own, John agent has his own, and you're working with all these different agents and they all have their different signatures that they want you to put on there. Well, this transaction, we want you to physically go in and change that to make sure that it's correct. So that is one of the steps that you need to do. Oh, whoops. Where was I headed now?
Phone numbers, how to add in phone numbers.
Okay, let me go to.
So everyone should have a texting number in open to close. That's how you're receiving the alerts from open to close that you have, something pending. So I don't know if we can set it necessarily for everyone else. Well, the text number you should be able to click on. So he went over to organization and users, and then you should be able to select the text number and add it in there, I believe.
Yeah.
Awesome.
New one. Now this person already has one.
This one already has one. Whoever you're logged in as doesn't have one though yet.
Let me see. No, they are. I'm in the main account. So.
Oh, you are. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That could be why it's doing it.
There
But
you go.
here's where you can search for those numbers and add in those textable numbers. The numbers that are showing up here are just pulling from Twilio. So they're going to be whatever's here. And this is purely for notification. It's so that you can text out of this application, text yourself, text other people. You can notify yourself. You can notify other people that are on the transactions if you want to send them messages, specifically text messages. This is how you're communicating outside of the transaction.
Yeah. And there will be some changes to the texting in the future, but for right now, that's the way it works. We are getting annihilated with fees from Twilio for people that aren't even using their texting numbers, but they have 8 texting numbers in their account. So we are looking at some possible fixes to that, just so we're not getting charged thousands and thousands of dollars for numbers that aren't being used in the future. So you may be getting notifications that say, hey, you aren't using this number, or I'm not even sure what we're going to do, but we're definitely looking at that right now to try to minimize and cut out, $5,000-6,000 a month.
The other place that we want to go to is we want to set up our emails. So if we haven't gone in and added in our emails or set up our Google integrations or our Microsoft integrations, we also want to make sure that we have our email set up. That way we can email from the transaction.
Yeah, so I'm going to go here first just to show them where they can come in and find. So here are all the emails that have been set up already. This one's with Google, that one's with Microsoft. You can have, the non-API emails. But if you come over here to the apps and APIs, here's where it's set up. So you can come in here and set up your email address here.
Everyone should have their individual email addresses set up here. That way it goes to you. So if you're logging in and you see that it says it's connected, that means your email address should be set up already.
Yeah.
Right?
One caveat I would say is if you're working as a team and there's 3 people working on all the same transactions and you have like an info at, you can all connect the same email. That doesn't, if you connect it here, doesn't mean someone else on your team can't connect it. So if you guys are working from a general inbox, just connect it on all 3 accounts.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's good strategy.
Yeah, it depends on how your team runs, but a lot of teams just work out of the same email inbox. A lot of teams will have maybe an assistant that's in their email all day. So the assistant can have an account and have that info ad or, whatever contracts ad or whatever you guys decide to go with. Now, let me think about this for a second. If you have like an info at email address in Google, and it's not a real email address, it's a catch-all email address. And some of you that aren't familiar with this, don't even worry about it. But the people that are familiar with what I'm talking about, you can go and create a group, and a group is basically a fake email address. It's not an email that you're paying for, but I could go and create one called contracts at, listings at, whatever at, customer service at. what happens is in Google, you can go in and say, anytime someone emails customer service at, I want it to go to these 5 people, and it will reroute those. Now, the problem is these are verified email addresses that we're connecting here. So if you have like a customer service at, you're not gonna be able to connect that inbox. You're gonna have to connect the inbox that it gets rerouted to, because what we're doing here is verifying that this is a paid Google account. And so if you do have those kind of groups that you're working in, you're just gonna have to download your account that they funnel into. So one way to get around that though, if you don't want to use your personal account, instead of having to add contracts at, listings at, closings at, all that stuff, what you could do is reroute them to something called like team at, and have all of those emails going into one inbox that you actually do pay for. And then you can connect that to all 8 of your team members' accounts. So they're getting all those different things. It does tell you which one it's from. So if you're in there, you can say anything coming from customer service at, I want you to put in this inbox. Anything coming from contracts at, I want it to go into this inbox. There's a way to do multiple inboxes in your Gmail account. If you want to know more about that, just reach out to me. I can tell you more about that. It's kind of a side subject, but yeah, I just wanted to point out, if you do have like an info at that's not a real email address, there is a little workaround to get that so that all your teammates can see it. All right, 15-minute. Doesn't look like we have any questions. I'll give you guys another 5 minutes here. I'll just kind of browse around and see if there's anything else I want to talk about. But if we don't get any questions by 10 till, we'll go ahead and end it.
I'm trying to think of some other things that have come up.
Pricing. Let me talk about pricing a little bit. It is all the names of the plans are going to change. And hold on a second. Sorry, I had to cough. So yeah, the pricing names are going to change. We're going to go from premium to grow. So grow is going to be our bottom account. We're going to get rid of light and plus. So if you're on light and plus, you'll still be able to be on it, but not no new people will be able to add to it. So premium is going to be our new lowest account, because we found that like 95% of people are on premium or above. So that is going to change to the grow plan. All the features will be the same on that one. Yes, the same on that one. Now, when we get up to the Pro plan, which is now the premium add-on, we are adding DocuSign and some other things that I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but DocuSign's the big one. That's going to be on the premium add-on. If you want to upgrade and get DocuSign, there will be a point where we reach out to you and say, you need to physically do that in your account. You need to go from version 1 to version 2. So when we release these plans, we're going to announce this 5,000 times, but I just want to give you guys a heads up that you have to go from version 1 to version 2, and then you'll get all the version 2 features on that. And then there's the scale plan, which is the automation plan. That one, oh, I know one other one is webhooks on that $99 plan. So once you go to version 2, you'll have webhooks. Right now it's in beta. On the scale plan, you're going to have task conditionals. So when I check off this task, only send this email if these 5 things are true. You're also going to have more trigger menu items, better ways to do automated triggers. God, there's so much stuff being added to that plan. You'll just have to see it when it comes out. But we've been working on a lot of stuff for our top tier plan. Okay. Would you explain how to set up a file rule? Sure. So just setting it up is really easy. You just come over here to the filters. So hammer filters. And then when you're in this menu, you go to file rules and you have to create the file rule first. So theory behind file rules is you can either set them up very general and you won't have as much ability in the automation department, or if you're thinking you're going to want to automate things in the future off of file rules or make conditions off file rules, what I do is put a suffix on here: BS for buyer signed, FE for fully executed, SS for seller signed, AS for agent signed, LS for lender signed. So if this document requires all of these people to sign it, I can see exactly what state it's in, and then I can make that a condition. So I can say, when I receive the addendum number 1, SS, and I'm representing the seller, I want to automatically send it off to the buyer through an email. So that would be a trigger. That trigger would say, if condition addendum number 1 SS exists in property, send this email, send it to this person, include this information, and automatically attach this document. So all of that automation can happen just by setting that file role. Now, where you set it is over in the transaction. And you can come over to documents. And this is the worst one to keep coming into, because let me just approve these. Oh, I don't have file. Okay, I'll just scroll down. So when you're in here, your document templates can automatically come into the transaction. So you can say, if financing is yes, then bring in my financing documents that I'm going to need to get for compliance. So you'll have,
and we've talked about this before. You guys can pair your task templates with your document templates. So if they're financing tasks, you can also add on that document template as well on that trigger in your intake form.
Yeah. So when these come in, you may have a preset file role. We're not going to talk about that right now. But let's say it comes in like this as a placeholder. How to set that file role is just click on it here and say, actually, this is the addendum number 1 BS. Add it. It's going to have this little flame that's letting you know that that file role has been set. And now the different places that this could possibly affect is emails. So you can automatically attach documents to emails depending on, here, let me actually go over to an email so you can see it a little bit easier. Email template. Go in here. Whoops. Grab this and pull it down. Down here, you can say, anytime this template email is sent out, I want you to attach all the files with the file role addendum number 1 BS that matches the main file. So that's the front file, not the ones that sit behind it. And then you add it. And now every time this email is sent out, okay, it's going to go to, let's see who it's going to here. It's going to the buyer. It's anyone in the role CC on all buyer email is going to get a copy of this. And everyone in the role BCC on buyer email is going to get a copy of this too. It's going to put in this information with whatever smart block information comes in, depending on the conditions. And then it's going to go looking your file and say, do I have any file roles that say addendum number 1 BS? If so, automatically attach that document to this email. So that's one way you can use file roles. The other way is conditional. So whether that's triggers, I'm going to show you smart blocks because it's a little bit easier to get into, but you can use this as with triggers as well. Is down here at the bottom of these smart blocks, you can say, if this file role, let's pretend this isn't a contact role and this is a file role. If file role addendum number 1 exists in property, then go ahead and put this information into that email. So that's another conditional way that you can use file roles. And then actually I will go over to triggers and just show you real quick. If you're using triggers, you can also do that here where it says, if file role addendum number 1 exists in property, then send this text message at this day and this time, blah, blah, blah. So it's another way you can do it.
What Andrew's looking at here, though, is the fully scale plan.
Yeah.
So if you guys are seeing triggers on your properties, that means you're on the fully automated scale plan. And that's where you're going to be able to have that ability to add on conditions to triggers this way.
And if you're on the fully automated scale plan, you're also going to have the ability to soon come in here and set conditions on your triggers in your tasks. So when I check this task off, I want to add this template and I want to add this email, but only if whatever conditions are in here is true. So using our last example would be file role addendum number 1 exists in property, then go ahead and add this. So now you can get, it makes it a lot better if you're a task-based person, because now you could stack this up with a bunch of stuff that could or couldn't happen depending on what's happening in the transaction. And your conditions are going to control that. If this contact exists, send this email. If this file exists, send this email. If this field is greater than 5, send this email. And it's not limited to one condition either, as we saw in the intake forms. You can stack these up with, I think I put a limit on it of 99 conditions. I'd have to check with Shane on that, but I think it's 99 conditions you could have. If you have 99 conditions, you need to call us. We need to rework your system.
Yes, please call.
Something's wrong with
We'll get on a call together. Try to figure out what's going on.
But what I'm saying is you have a lot of capability as far as these go. You don't have to be limited to 1 or 2. I have some with conditions. Probably the most conditions I think I've ever had to have is probably like maybe 10-ish, somewhere right around there. And that was a very complex situation that was happening in a transaction. All right, what else we got here? Is there a way to add additional dates that only are relevant for the single transaction and the details without having them set up as a field through the field builder? I kind of would pose a question back to you is why would you want to do that? I would say that if that's, and no is the answer, you have to have a field for it to come in. But what you could do is just create a section of like fields that aren't used a lot and put that in that section. So
my other follow-up question for this is if you mean the field builder as in when you're looking at the intake form, like you've already created the field, it's in your field editor and you just want to add on that one specific date to this specific transaction and you don't want to have it come in through the intake form, you can do it. So Andrew, if you want to head back to any of the properties really.
yeah, let me back up then. If you
okay.
want to talk about that. So it has to be a field first. If you come to the field editor, it has to be a field because otherwise the system has no way to link this throughout the transaction. Now, what Hannah's saying is as long as it's created here somewhere, it doesn't mean you have to bring it into the transaction. So you could say, go down to templates and my intake form templates again. And I don't know what this is, but let's just go into this one. And now you can come in here and go to your triggers. And you could literally just put one field in here. You could say, add a trigger. I think I have a singular field in here somewhere. Oh no, this is a different one. Okay, so add a trigger. When it's submitted by the agent, I want it to fire. I want to add an individual field. Go ahead and add that. And I'm going to add the field, I don't know, contract title, doesn't matter. And now I want to, you can either make this required. Now, you can use the yes on this one because it's a singular field. And if you think they're going to have this information every single time, you can say yes here, and then the TC is going to have to fill this out before it becomes a transaction. But I'm going to leave it no, and then add, close this. I'm going to turn it on now so it's working, and I'm going to open this up. And now it's going to add the contract title field if these things are true, which I didn't put in here, but so that's how you would add a singular field.
If you wanted to do it on the intake form. Now, if you don't want to build out the trigger and you've just found yourself, I want to add on this particular field, you're going to navigate to that specific transaction. You can click on that little 4 square expand, I guess, Andrew.
You can click here. You can click here and go to, it's a couple different ways to do this.
Yeah.
Click here and go to manage property fields. Okay, it's going to take you to the same place as if we added these because you may be down, you may have, 5,000 fields in here for some reason. It's a robust transaction. You're all the way down here and you're like, hey, I need to manage my fields. Now you can just click that and it'll open up your fields. And let's say I needed to add a tax ID. I always try to hit this because it's blue and this one's gray and just it's attractive. But this is actually adding your templates, your field templates. So you don't want to do that. You add the field here, you hit close. And now if I come back up to the top and look, my tax ID is in there.
Now, another thing with this that I've noticed a lot is when you are on that, oh yeah, you can come into the field editor too if you wanted to add it on.
This was a really nice addition because you're in here and you're like, oh, you know what? I forgot. I need to add this field to, my field editor. And it took like about 4 or 5 clicks to get back to it. So now you can just pop that open and it's going to open up right here.
Perfect. The other thing with fields that I've noticed a lot of people have been running into this is go ahead and click on any one of these and then click on manage again.
Yep.
Is that as we're scrolling through this, if you guys see that remove section and that is red, even if you select the fields, the section is not going to show. So if you need to bring in a like Andrew said, if you have a specific field section that says you don't need to always bring this in, but you want to bring it in sometimes, you would just want to make sure you unselect the red remove section and then select your fields, or select your fields and then select the red button.
Yeah.
Basically, if we don't have that unselected, the fields aren't going to come in. So you can see Andrew selecting specific fields.
I'm going to go down to closing because it's all at the bottom, and I'm just going to add these fields in, and then I'm going to hit close.
You see it updated. That's what it was doing. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom.
Oh.
Oh.
I wonder if you changed that.
He might have, which would be great if he did. But regardless, it's always good CYA to make sure to
Oh, no,
unselect that
you know
remove
what?
section
Let me hit remove section. I must have hit it in the wrong, I might have hit it twice.
in the wrong order.
Let me try it. Yep, now it's
There
gone.
we go. Yeah.
I must have unclicked the red. So just make sure if something appears that shouldn't, just make sure that you didn't accidentally unclick or click something.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Just double check that if you're missing your fields.
All right, we got one more question and then we are out of time. So trying to implement smart blocks, how do you quickly review how they work? That's a big topic. We got 2 minutes. I'm going to give you the 1,000-foot view and then you can definitely email into support. No problem.
No worries.
That's my fault. So let me go in here and let me tell you one thing. You want to test these as you're doing them. Okay. That's the biggest advice I can give you. Don't put 5,000 smart blocks in your emails and then try to test your email at one time. So I'm going to go Control S, that pops open your smart blocks. I'm in my accepted offers. You would come in here and you would just create a new one, whatever it's called. This one is for a co-buyer agent. So like my emails say something like, John's going to represent you on this file. Well, if it was a co-buyer agent, I want to say John and Sally are going to represent you on this file. So this smart block only comes in if, now we scroll down a little bit, co-buyer agent exists on property. So if there's no co-buyer agent listed in your contacts, this will not even come into the transaction. But if I want to test this, the way to do it is go to your emails, apply your template. So we would have to have a template with this in it, which I don't know which one that would be, but let's just go ahead and apply this one. Okay, it's going to bring it in and it's going to bring it in based on this transaction. So you do have to pay attention to what fields are filled out because certain fields could trigger what smart blocks are coming in or what contacts are, what smart blocks are coming in. But let's just say, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring in that smart block. So you can come in here and you can say smart block and that one was and co-buyer agent here. Okay, no value for inside the property. Yeah, that's fine.
That's actually a good point. You see how he clicked on it and it said there's no value for this. In other words, we don't have a co-buyer on this particular property. If Andrew heads over to contacts, there is no co-buyer. Yeah, so the smart block isn't applicable.
So you'd have to come over here to contacts in this one and you just have to change maybe buyer. Let me just do this to
the other place that I've told you guys to check is that typically if you already have those smart blocks on there, obviously I always say this, create one test transaction where you're going to be applying all these email templates, task templates to review them. But if you head up to that Q bar up at the top and you say inspect on any one of those emails, if they have smart blocks in it, because sometimes you want them, sometimes you don't. This one doesn't have an email template, so this isn't a good example. But up at the top where it says message, next to that, it'll say template. And then you can see what is the email template that's associated. There we go. That's a good one. If there's an email template associated, you can see it there. If you go to message, you'll see the version of it that's rendered and the version of it that's missing merge fields, including smart blocks. So it just kind of depends on if you're making sure you're filling out your fields, whether specific merge fields will come in, whether smart blocks will come in. And this is one of the ways that you can double check that.
Yeah. So when you click that template, it will show you what, this one just has a merge field. So then we can go back over and see if that merge field came in. It did. And if it doesn't, it'll have a big red box here that says, hey, this merge field or this smart block is missing. So there is a double check there. Now getting back to, I put a co-buyer agent in there now. So if I went to, oh, this one's super long. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. Okay. Let's go back over to our merge fields and let's go to our smart blocks and let's go to and co-buyer agent. No value. I'll have to check this one, but basically what you would do, Jennifer, is come over to, you come over to the source code and you can just paste that in that smart block wherever you wanted it in this email and just check it to make sure like, actually it'd probably be better to find here. Let me do this. Let me go to my template emails because it's going to be hard for you guys to understand this without a template email that we know what smart block is in it. Okay, here we go. Smart block contract timeline. I'll take the filter off here.
So keep that in mind too, if you have your filters on there as well. If you're sorting by categories, some of those smart blocks, you're not going to be able to see them. So just double check that it says all categories or that you're looking at the correct category. That is the same across the system. If you're in date templates and you have a category, if you're in document templates and you have a category selected, you're only going to see what's underneath that category. So if it's yellow, you're under a category. If it's plain white, then you're not under a category. You should see all of your smart blocks, all of your other fields. It's unfiltered.
I found one now. So property details, here we go.
Perfect.
So there's one condition on it. That's what that one meant on the outside. There's one condition to bring this in. And that condition is going to be contract client type is equal to buyer. So if that's buyer, then this piece of this email will come in. And the name of this email is webinar demo. Yeah. Okay. Webinar demo. So let's go back over to that transaction. And we'll go to the.
Probably want to make sure it's a buyer's one. Is this a buyer's one? Oh, it is a buyer's one. Awesome. Yep. Property details. I can see it.
So apply the template. It was the
webinar. Perfect.
Demo. Now, if you have an email in this email section, you can go down the bottom and delete it. There's a place to delete this right here and clear all that out if you wanted to. But what happened was I put that in there, and because it's a buyer, it put in this right here was that smart block. So it inserted that, and we come over here and check that it was a buyer. That came in, the formatting looks good. We're happy with it. We can move on to the next smart block. But until you get it, because sometimes it'll come in like this. And you're like, what the heck happened? So then you go back over to your smart blocks, and you may have accidentally had like a break line in there, or maybe you just hit return accidentally or something happened. So you want to check these on a one-to-one basis until you feel comfortable with them, and then go ahead and apply the whole template when you get them all in, make sure they all came in correct, and then you can move on. We get so many people that don't check them, and then they go to the first transaction, it sends out a bunch of muck to the client, and then they're angry that, you know, it didn't look right. Well, they didn't check them. So make sure you're checking them. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I think that's it. Jennifer, I know that was kind of a short description of smart blocks. We do have a strategy session on smart blocks. It's about a 20-minute video that goes really deep into it. It's called Fields, Merge Fields, Smart Blocks and Smart Groups. I think that's the title of it. And if you look for that one, it's about a 20-minute version of just going through how all these things play together, going much deeper into this with examples. So that should give you a good hold on how to do smart blocks. So
yeah, if you reach out to us in support as well, we can go over and we can send you those direct articles that we think that might help. Or if you want to get some strategy, you're welcome to reach out and be like, how I want to send to this, and I only want it to go at this time. We can also assist with that as well and support.
Cool. Thanks guys for hanging in there for an hour and 6 minutes. Appreciate you guys being on here. We'll same time, same place next week. We do have a webinar next week on Thursday on how to bring a VA into your business. We will be training VAs for you. So we will have an OTC trained VA that we can insert into your business. And so if you guys are interested in that, I'll be making an announcement soon. I believe it's going to be like 11 o'clock Pacific on Thursday, the 25th. And we'll give you much more information about getting on like a list. If you're interested in getting an assistant for, you know, half the price of a US based assistant, and they can probably handle 60 to 70% of what you're doing in your system as well. So, and what comes with that, just so you know, is ongoing training. So not only the upfront training, but ongoing training each month. Also some priority support options. If your VA puts a support ticket in, they're going to have some priority because we've trained them, and we want to make sure that we're providing a good service to you as well. So if you have interest on that, hang tight, watch the Facebook page. I will be announcing that in the next 3 or 4 days. All right. Have a good day.